Welcome back, everyone. Welcome to the Ask Dr. Be Good show, where we try to highlight all the positive things going on in public education and things that are happening at Legacy as well. This week, we're going to revisit school safety. We talked about school safety early last year, because as we started the podcast year, that was something parents wanted to know about. But we've had 2 school shootings and a legislative session since then, so I think we have more to talk about. Before we talk about that, though, let's introduce who our guest is today.
Hi, I'm Staci Weaver, and I am the Senior Operations Director at Legacy Preparatory Charter, and one of the areas that I oversee is the safety and security for our schools.
And you're a retired police officer.
I am.
So you really know your stuff. So welcome, and you've been on before.
Yes, I have.
So let's get right to it. Let's talk about some of the changes. First, let's talk about school safety over the last 10 years.
So I think it's changed tremendously. I think there's an awareness of the needs for the training, and that it's more than just lockdown and that's it. We really have procedures in place. We have protocols. We have policies, and we're now mandated by the governor to have a very intense and not only just active shooter, but in there all kinds of emergency operations have to be listed and turned into the state now. So it's very different.
So before we delve into that, let's talk a little bit about the easy stuff. Well, how do we make our buildings secure?
I think some of the things that you can do that are fixes that aren't too hard is having double sets of doors to come through, and that all doors are kept locked at all times. Teaching our students not to piggyback, like hold the door for anybody that comes through. Those are those easy things. The films that are ballistic resistant, having the access cards instead of the, just where everybody has to open the door. The access card cameras where you can actually have your receptionist see who's at the door. You're not comfortable. It doesn't look like somebody that's there that usually does school business with us. They may ask why they're there and be able to question it before they have to let them in. So just cameras. Schools have cameras everywhere.
We went from 0 cameras. I think we've got 30 at just Plano alone.
Correct. And so we updated our cameras at Legacy. We put extra cameras in where they weren't catching areas, so that we have the most up-to-date 20th century cameras. They can be accessed by a receptionist right on a computer, so they can always see what's going on. The principal can do it in their phones. So they have access at all times to see what's going on the campus.
And so those are things that we already do. So we have 2 double locked doors at all the areas, all the buildings. We have a school receptionist with a panic button. We have the bulletproof film. We have now starting this year. Talk about the changes this year.
So this year, what we're going to do is we're going to put on all of our schools, back, front, anywhere you can access. We're going to have basically 4 access points in each school, and it'll be done with a card. And that the only way you can get in is with that card. So nobody can get in or out any other way. You won't have to worry about it being locked, because it won't open without that card. Everything remains locked.
No more keys.
No more keys. We're getting away from keys. That'll also, those cards actually financially are great also, because we're using them for everything, for alarms, for to get into your, to make copies, all those type of things. So the whole system as a whole is cost effective. Where we save in one area, it'll pay for bringing those things in.
So we'll have smart school going on.
We sure will. Absolutely. We'll have a smart campus.
Run by one white little card.
Absolutely.
And so the high school already has that, because
Yes.
it just recently built. We're moving towards adding that a little bit at a time to the other buildings. We have now school, or I should call it safety monitors.
Correct.
And we have one at the high school, one at the middle school, elementary, and Mesquite.
Correct.
And then we added an AP in Plano that will also be our safety monitor. He'll get trained with all the safety information that the other safety monitors will get.
Exactly. And we also have what's called the school marshal program, and I'm sure we'll talk about that in a little bit, but we also have school marshals.
Can you talk a little bit about the legislative session and what came out of that?
So from that, it came out that we absolutely need a tremendous amount of training. And that can't be done. We can't have unfunded mandates. So we're being giving funding now that we can use for safety and security, whether that's to hire, like I said, school marshals, which basically the governor has said you can have one school marshal per building, or for every 200 students, a school marshal, where it used to be 1 to 400. So they're seeing the need for more safety and security on the campuses.
So you said funding, but it's not very much, is it?
No, it's only 50 cents a student.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
So bigger districts, yeah, it might look like a lot of money because, 50 cents with 10,000 or 6,000 kids or 30,000 kids, we have about 1,600. But it's a step in the right direction because we're putting safety and security first.
So what's the difference now between what the safety requirements were for charters before and what they are now?
So we really weren't included in a lot of the mandates that ISDs were. The safety audits, the safety meetings. Now it's come out that charter schools will have to do safety audits, and that's once every 3 years. It's going to have to be submitted to the Texas Center for School Safety at Texas State in San Marcos, and they'll review your plan and then decide if your plan, it's not really your plan, but where you're lacking, if any of it's an emergency need, if you don't have the right protocols in place, and then they'll send you a report back.
And then we have to follow
Absolutely.
the guideline, the recommendations.
The good thing is Legacy has not waited for that to happen. So we've did a safety audit check last year. What we found from that summary is what we're doing now to make the schools safe. Everything's, was put into our budget for this year. So we'll be ahead of the game because when we send our audit in, probably anything that we caught ourselves this year is what they would have caught, we're now doing.
So one of the changes that we made last year, much to the teacher's chagrin, was that we required them to lock their doors and to keep their shades closed. And that's part of the safety plan, right?
Absolutely. So in my training, I go to debriefings. And the debriefings come after, unfortunately, school shootings like Parkland and Santa Fe. But the one thing that's come out of there has not been one that's changed this yet in the school shootings. If the doors were locked, the shooter didn't enter the class. They don't waste time. They look for open doors. I mean, unless everything's glass and they can shoot through it, then there's really nothing you can do. And that's why we recommend not to build your schools with lots of big glass windows and things like that. Because what happens is when a shooting occurs, the whole thing takes 4 to 5 minutes. So like I said, they're not wasting time. They're looking for open doors, easy access to commit these mass shootings. And that's why we practice that, because it's proven that locked doors save lives.
Yeah, our teachers were a little bit reluctant in that area last year. I think they're getting more accustomed to that, not being able to prop their doors open, having to have a knocking system in place with kids. That's today's world.
Exactly. And once change is hard in any way, so once they get used to it, because I can tell you from last year to this year, in these first few weeks of school, doors are locked. Majority is very few instances where I find that a door is not locked. So it makes me feel really comfortable. I was in the high school today, checked every door because I was there. They were locked. So it's good to see they're following the protocols we're putting in place.
I hate the fact that we have to keep the shutters closed and, because we had windows so we could look in and not have to disturb the class. But now we have to have different protocols. So in the old days, we had fire drills and then we had tornado drills. Remember having our little rear ends up against the lockers with our heads down. Talk about what in today's world our drills look like and how many.
Sure. So we have to have a conversation, it's been recommended, with our fire marshals, because there hasn't been a child that has died in a school fire in over 50 years. Why? Because we do these drills. So we're now being told that we're going to have to do they're going to give us a number of drills that we have to complete a year, and that includes fire. Within that number, they're recommending that 4 of those be active shooter drills. You also have to get your emergency hazards in, like you said, your tornadoes, your bad weather, those type of things in as well. So we're looking at probably no more than, but a good amount that they're recommending is 4 active shooter drills, lockdown drills a year.
Combined with the fire drill. So that's about a drill a month for our 9 months of school.
Well, that's only if our fire department will allow us to. We have to talk to our fire marshals and see if we can maybe skip 1 or 2 months in there, because it's right now it's every month. But you're looking at least 1 a month in some months too.
Can you talk about the active shooter drills and how we're training kids differently in that approach? It used to be hide.
Exactly.
Can you talk about?
Sure. So now what it is it's run. It's basically run, hide, fight. So we're teaching children, if they can get out of the building safely, go. I'm telling teachers, if you know you can get out, go. Don't stay, don't lock down. If you're right by an exit door, take the kids and go. If you can't, then we're teaching them to hide. And don't want to explain exactly how we do that, but we do it in a manner that keeps them safest. If a shooter or an intruder enters the room and there's nothing else you can do, then we teach them to fight.
Huge difference. I know that we had a couple of active shooter drills last year. Can you talk a little bit about how those turned out? What was the reaction of the kids?
Sure. So I can tell you that the one that we did at Plano went exceptionally well. We checked to see if we can hear students, if all doors are locked, blinds are closed, those type of things. And it went fantastic. Every angle I tried to look in on, if there was a way to look in, I could not see the students. So the teachers did a great job of finding places where you couldn't see them. Doors were locked very well. Did the same thing at Mesquite. We had very few. We had a couple of new teachers, some of our teachers that had drilled before, do new, very, very small things to recommend, but overall, as drills go, was fantastic.
And then Mesquite's much bigger. So
Mesquite did really well. We had only 2 teachers, and it's a little tougher when you have kindergartners, and so they were trying to be creative, and and so we worked with them and we explained to them what would have been a better practice. Not that it was a wrong practice, but there was a better practice with kids and basically just gave them some more ideas. But as a whole, fantastic. I mean, you could hear a pin drop. So they did a great job, and doors were locked.
So when you do that, we do things like we post it on Facebook.
Correct.
And we send out a message about not picking kids up at that time. It's total lockdown.
Exactly. So what we do is the receptionist puts something on the front that says lockdown. That's it, and then she locks if it's safe enough for her to do that. Right before I do it, like I'm talking within 60 seconds, I have one of the IT guys send out a blast, put it on Facebook, and so parents know. They get emailed, we are in a lockdown drill. It is only a drill. Please don't contact your children at this time. It is a drill. And we will post again when we're all clear. And we treat it like if someone's there to pick up their child, they're out of luck. It's nothing personal, but we got to practice it like we'd really do it. My principals don't get to help me like a walk around to see what's going on. They have to go also. So everybody practices it, because you're going to do it exactly how you practice. So when it happens, I want them to be practicing. They're finding a place that's safe too.
You brought us a video.
Yeah, and let's see if we can get that video up. So there's a foundation called the I Love You Guys Foundation. John Michael Keyes started it. His daughter, Emily Keyes, was killed in an active shooter situation in Platte Canyon, Colorado. And that's where I do a lot of my training with the I Love You Foundation. So we'll take a look, and gives you a good idea of where all this started.
I can't imagine being in your shoes, but you have taken what has happened to your family, and now you are trying to help all our families. And I want to thank you for doing that. John Michael, I really do appreciate that. Let's start here. I want to get right to what you say can be done and is being done in your program. The standard response protocol, 4 actions we're talking about here: lockout, lockdown, evacuate, and shelter. Go through them for us.
Yeah, what we saw was that there wasn't a common language in a crisis between students, staff, and first responders. And in working with districts and law enforcement across the country, we finalized on those 4 actions being the ones to work with kids and staff and law enforcement during a crisis. Lockout is used when there's a threat outside the building. Let's lock the doors and secure the perimeter. Lockdown's more serious. That's when there's a threat inside the building. And we shut the classroom door, we lock it, we turn out the lights, and we get out of sight. And then evacuate and shelter, we train kids on how to handle those when a crisis comes up.
John Michael, the one thing, when I think about it, every day we send our children to school. Sometimes we put them in a bus and the bus takes them to school. But I'm always thinking, why hasn't safety been more of a priority I mean, we're sending little ones like we saw in Newtown to even high school kids. These are our children. You know, they have to go to school. Why do you think it is that it takes what happened to your family and what happened in Newtown for us to even have this conversation?
Well, it's certainly a conversation nationally now, but I think behind the scenes, a lot of schools take this very seriously. And you got to recognize it isn't simply one thing. There isn't a magic answer to this fuzzy concept of school safety. It really takes partnerships in advance between law enforcement and educators, and practicing and drilling, and students and staff have to take it seriously. And so, while certainly the conversation has tragically become a national one again, there is a lot going on behind the scenes across the country that rarely parents or communities see.
John Michael, let me ask you this question, and this is a little more personal. When a story like Newtown happens, and you see that, does that take you back, and does that give you more fuel to do what you're doing to try to keep my children safe and everyone else's children safe?
Yes and yes. It's always difficult, and I think Newtown reminded us that these tragedies do indeed impact the entire country, and our hearts are out for the families of the victims and the first responders. But it has once again solidified my resolve to make sure that we keep this message coming to schools, coming to law enforcement, and coming to parents, that we can do something, we can be proactive, and we can keep our kids safe.
So they talked in the video about a common language. How are we making sure that we have a common language with our law enforcement and so forth?
So all the trainings that I attend, most of the ones I attend, law enforcement attends as well. The standard response protocol is becoming nationwide. Our state is right, that's what our governor recommends. So all of our police officers and everybody's being trained in this. So it's really become the common language. In the state of Texas, I can tell you that almost everybody uses SRP. So it's definitely, if you walk the halls of our school and you look in our classrooms, you'll see we have them posted, the standard response protocol in all the hallways and in all the classrooms. And basically that way teachers know exactly what's going on. They have it right at their desk if I call a lockdown, or even the receptionist calls a lockdown because she sees something. You know, people are under the misconception they got to get with the principal. Anybody can call a lockdown if they see a weapon or they see somebody with a gun or anything like that. So it just gives them a really good description of what to do. And I train our teachers exactly to the standard response call. So when police officers come in, our teachers are going to react how the officers expect them to.
Is this an ongoing training?
It's ongoing because I will tell you that John Michael Keyes, the gentleman whose daughter was killed by an active shooter, he really writes the standard protocols and he changes them because the more things that he learns and he sees, like hold was never part of it. Now hold was added this year. So it does change, and what happens is every year, unfortunately, I hate to say that, and there's a slide that shows those statistics, it just happens more and more often, and so basically we have to look at what happened in this situation. What did we do right as law enforcement and as EMS, and what did we miss? I mean, unfortunately, when you look at that, we have a statistic up right now, and you look at it, Texas leads right after California in active shooters.
Really?
And then Florida. So it's pretty
I didn't
scary.
know that.
Yeah, it's staggering statistics. I mean, and there's no, it's not coastal, it's not, cold weather, hot weather. Yeah, it's just sporadic on the numbers. I mean, Louisiana 45. I mean, you can look around and see,
Wow.
just in states that you wouldn't even think about. I mean, take a look at Tennessee. I mean, tremendous amount of shooting. You wouldn't think that. And when we talk about school shootings or these type of shootings, we're talking that 4 more people died in those shootings.
Wow.
Yeah, it's staggering when you think about it.
It's very random.
Yeah, it is. There's no rhyme or reason. When you talk about, and that's another component, we'll have to come back on another show, but the mental health aspect is a huge part of that, and that's a whole nother area that I've now got certified in to teach our counselors and our teachers so that we're meeting the needs and that we're catching those situations when they're small. Basically, most active shootings that take place, it's by a student. If you go on a scale of 0 to 100, basically, the number of incidents, the students are over 100 of the shootings that happen. A percent of it, almost 100 of them out of, I think that in 1 year there was like, let's say 200, 100 of them were students. 27 were former students, 19 no relation, they don't know why, 9 it was unknown reasons, and then it gets smaller into just basically a teacher, a former teacher, things like that. But the majority of our students are the shooters, and what do we hear at every one of them? We missed the signs. They were there. Nobody reported. They saw things on Facebook. When you see something, say something. We can't say that enough. That the shooting that we just had in El Paso, at first they said there were no signs. Now it's coming out for the last 10 years. There were things, there were, signs, and nobody, they at first had said, like, the parent called the police, but she was worried about his safety. Her call was not to warn police that she was worried about her child hurting people. But when you go back to the school, all kinds of things.
It's a
were
small
red flags.
world. The guitar player in our church taught music to him for 6 years, and he was a little off, but back then you didn't rush to the conclusion that if we don't do something, that might be an outcome. We do that now. Before we go on to some of the things that we might want to talk about in our next podcast, as far as the mental health aspect, talk a little bit about the school marshal and the guidelines and so forth.
Okay, so school marshal program, basically schools are allowed to have school marshals, and that was built for your rural schools, your charter schools that can't afford or don't have enough law enforcement, and in this way you have some form of law enforcement on your campus. They are not there as a police officer. The only thing that your school marshal there is to stop great bodily injury or death. That's when let's say their Texas Peace Officer certification kicks in. In those situations, they can act as a Texas peace officer, and they're able to stop whatever actions are going on to save lives.
So we have a current school marshal that sort of floats between the buildings. Do we have any plans to get more?
Yeah, so we definitely have plans to there's another training coming up, and we're going to start screening, and just so you know, we don't just pick people and they become a school marshal. We send them for a psychological evaluation. They have to go through a rigorous training, and they have to be able to get through all of that before they can come back and be a school marshal on our campuses.
But the people will never know who they are.
No, so it's up to the school marshal. It's recommended they stay anonymous and that no one knows who they are on the campus, because they have to be an employee of the district. You can't just hire someone to be the school marshal. So they're employees in the district. They're not somebody that has constant direct interaction with students. And we just keep it anonymous for the safety of the school marshal.
Okay. We had alluded to mental health, and let's talk a little bit about what we're currently doing, and we'll expand on that. We have, and we start every day with restorative practices, and that is where the teacher works with the class to build relationships so that kids learn that they're a community, how to function within the community, and how to function when there's a problem with another child within the community. Over time, that type of discipline technique should help manage some of the lesser how can I say this? Some of the lesser mental health issues. We also have counselors who are going, and staff who are going to trauma-sensitive classroom training. That's somewhat new training, and it's really good for our staff to be aware that so many of our kids oftentimes come from families, especially families from poverty, and single parent homes with a void. And we talked about that with Byron Ricks, and that void gets filled either in a positive way in school by the teacher or in a negative way with bad behavior, drugs, alcohol over time. And so we work very, very quickly to identify those children who are sending messages that they need social emotional response from us. We now have a pre-suicide risk assessment, and we haven't had any, knock on wood, so far this year. Last year And one of the buildings had 3 within the first 2 weeks. So we have the understanding that our counselors have become even more important than ever. They can't be used for testing. They can't be used for anything other than making sure that our kids are feeling comfortable in their skins and in their minds and in their school communities. Do you have anything else that you want, that we haven't touched on, that you want to make sure that we bring up?
I think it's just that we can only do what we can do at school. Parents are a part of our community, and we talk about everything we're doing at school, but parents need to have conversations with their children, calm them down, let them know that they're safe at school, because kids hear everything and see everything, and I think that's the one component that sometimes gets missed when we do all this active shooter training and we drill at school. And so I think if our parents have those conversations with their children, they know we've had an active shooter drill that day, to let them know, because we never tell the kids, like the little ones, we don't call it that. We explain to them that we're practicing in case somebody comes on our campus that's not supposed to be, we keep you safe till we find out who they are and what they're doing. So parents need to, even though we do restorative circles after that and talk about it and how they feel, so that we can do that. But I think it's important that parents reassure them.
You bring up a really good point, because I bet there were times with some of these kids that were active shooters, somebody went home and said to their parent, that kid's acting really weird. There's something about him that just gives me the creepy vibes or something. And we didn't do anything. And so parents, listen to the kids. And if your child talks, especially repeatedly, about some odd behavior from a classmate, call the director of the school. Let them know. Say, this may be nothing but, because over time, that's data. That gives us information of a pattern of behavior from a child that shouldn't be missed.
And I will tell you that every active shooter training I go to, regardless of what type of training it is, stop the bleed, threat assessment, whatever it is, they'll always let us know on a campus, your climate and culture grows children. It also grows active shooters. And so it's so important. I mean, we're so ahead of the paradigm shift for this, because we do restorative practices and we do restorative circles, and we're there.
We had classroom climate and culture with Judge Payton and his crew, and how to have a warm, engaging classroom. So we really, really are working hard to make sure that our staff embraces the fact that if Johnny is showing odd behavior, Johnny's not being bad. Johnny's sending us a message.
We should be listening and we should be reacting. And if we have the right things in place and the protocols and the procedures, we can stop. That's why John Michael Keyes always says, when he starts every one of his trainings, we can stop the active shooter. And he explains, how we can do that.
It's a long-term solution, and we're in it for the long game.
We are.
All right. Well, we thank you for coming here, and we'll have you back if there's some new school safety rules come about from our last legislative session, but so far we're caught up.
We are.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone, and we'll be back next Tuesday.
Thank you for tuning in to the Ask Dr. Be Good show. For more information on Legacy Preparatory Charter Schools, visit our website, legacypca.com, or call 469-249-1099. And remember to like us on Facebook, where we stream live weekly Tuesdays at 3 p.m.